In psychology, there's a form of reinforcement called positive reinforcement, and there's a form of reinforcement called negative reinforcement. And negative reinforcement isn't punishment, it's actually removing a punishment. So, positive reinforcement is simply the act of encouraging that which is the behavior that you want to see more of in the individual. And I used to work with people with mental disabilities, and we would go to their houses, and these people were, they were in their 20s, 30s, sometimes even older, and they basically had the mind of a 2 or 3 year old. And it was very interesting to meet with these types of people. This was over a decade ago, but it was very interesting to meet with these types of people because it showed me how not being who you really are is going to prohibit you from really living the fullest that you could live. And with a full sack, as a man with a full sack, you're easily one of the coolest people alive, because not because you're like more rare or you're more special, but simply because you're more who you are. Oh my gosh. Guys, a ladybug just plopped on me. Wow. What a beautiful little ladybug. Go ahead, little ladybug. Go do your thing. Wow, what a good omen. We've had a lot of interesting bugs recently. We've had bees and ladybugs. Wow. Very interesting. So, reinforcing certain behaviors, like we had to learn how to reinforce their behaviors in this place that I was working at. And I studied psychology and philosophy in college, but really I didn't learn how to apply these things more until I got into business and until I got into really what I'm doing now as well. Like that's how I'm doing a lot of this stuff. My Godlike Mastery offer, for example, I've had people tell me that it's not therapy, but it's therapeutic. And I've had people on my comment section over the last few months specifically, they say that I'm very therapeutic in the way that I go about things, or just the way that I speak and whatnot. And I would say that this is simply because truth is love. And I'm not saying that I'm the arbiter of truth necessarily, but what I'm saying is that I'm speaking the truth as I see it to the best of my ability, because that's all we can really do. Nobody really knows what the fuck they're doing. Okay, nobody really knows what's going on. Nobody really knows. Like the only people who know is nobody. But you got to be nobody to know what's going on. And there's still a few attachments to this earthly plane that I have. And I've discovered that working with dreams, for example, recently, and astral projection, as well as what I call going into the mystical beyond, which is the realm beyond, time and space. Astral projection, I'm not saying that you should practice it. I'm not saying that you shouldn't practice it. I really don't have an opinion on it, whether you should or you shouldn't. It really depends on your own attachments. Like, I do a lot of dream analysis and astral projection, or going into the mystical beyond. Like I talk about in my book, I wrote a whole book on my journeys into the mystical beyond, the book of Oldishness. And so I go into the mystical beyond very frequently. I don't really astral project though. I don't really like to. It's not really my thing. Now there's a difference between like out of body experiences and astral projection / going into the mystical beyond, depending on how you perceive this, I suppose. But anyway, the real main thing that I want to get across here is it depends on your attachments. Now, me, myself, I had a lot of attachments to the physical world regarding money and finances. And so the way that I've been able to learn how to cultivate those release of attachments is through analyzing dreams or going into the mystical beyond. Like, it's not really like, some people don't need this for their spiritual practice. Like, if you're a man with a full sack and you want to go into astral projection, or you want to go into whatever it is that you want to go into, dream analysis. I do a lot of that with my godlike mastery initiates, but whatever the case is, if it's calling to you and you're being drawn to it, then that's what you do. And the best way that you'll be the coolest person or one of the coolest people ever is simply by being authentically drawn to what you're authentically drawn to. I'm very much so authentically drawn to dreams. I always have been. And I started tracking my dreams nearly a decade ago. I haven't missed one single night of dream tracking for the last decade nearly. It was since 2018 when I started to document my dreams. So it's been a long time, and I've got, a stack of journals with my dreams, thoughts, and reflections, really, and my ponderings of this reality and this experience of reality, because reality and truth are not the same thing. And this is something that I've come to find the older that I get, is that if you are attached to the way that you perceive reality, then you're going to be like a realist, or like you're going to be, let's look at the facts. And that makes sense logically. To the mind, it makes sense. And I was a realist for a long time. I thought that this was the case, right? But I never really learned how to actually reinforce positively inside myself the things that I wanted to reinforce. And so I had to learn how to apply what I've learned from other places to my own self. And the more I found that I positively reinforced what I was good at and what I enjoyed to do, and who I actually am, which is a fluid being. I don't really have a personality anymore, at least as far as I can tell. Maybe to some people, the way that they perceive me, I definitely do. And I can understand that. I can understand why you would think that I have a personality. And I suppose to some degree, like, how much do I want to go into this? Okay, for those that have stuck around, if you're intending to practice godlike mastery, then here we go. So when I went into the mystical beyond, and you'll discover this if you read my book, is that in many points and times, these, what I call characters of the unconscious, they would actually call me by a different name. So they would actually call me Alazar. And for some reason that felt natural in that domain. So I just went with it while I was in that practice. Because whenever you're going into the mystical beyond, it's best to treat it as if it's actually happening, because it is actually happening. You just might not believe that it's happening because you don't want to believe it's happening. Like, something that I've discovered with people, the more people that I work with, is that many people have many types of numinous or supernatural experiences. They just try to reduce it to, like, be a reductionist about it. Because if they were reductionist about it, then that means that they don't have to, they don't have to look at the fluidity of it. So this is where being a realist can really actually hinder you in your spiritual progress and being a man with a full sack, because again, the full sack philosophy is that of no philosophy. So it's just simply overflowingness. Speaking of bees, earlier we got another bee. I wonder where the ladybug. Oh, there's the ladybug. Ladybug is still chilling out. I don't know why, but I've always been very fond of ladybugs. I've always felt that they're pure spirits. They've never really felt like a bug. And you look at gnats and you look at flies and you think, yeah, that's like a robot. Like that's like a robotic, like, machine just doing its thing. Whereas a ladybug, it's like there's something I don't know, there's something exquisite about a ladybug. But I will say that Toy Story kind of kind of ruined ladybugs for me for a while when I first saw Toy Story. But anyway, so going back to your fluidity and personality, if you think that your personality is set, then you're going to be hindering yourself. Like, I actually, even just like in December and January of this last year, I was experiencing this because I was highly attached to being like an INFJ, subtly. I didn't realize how subtle it was, but I realized the subtleness of it. And the INFJ, for those of you that don't know, there's a personality test that you can take. It's called the MBTI test, and it's the Myers-Briggs personality test, and it's essentially where it takes Carl Jung's psychological analysis of psychological types and applies it to different personalities. So there's different types of cognitive functions that are being exhibited for an individual when they experience this type of personality, right? So there's a preference for certain types of functions cognitively. And I don't know if that really changes too much, but you get to adapt to the ones that you're not used to using, essentially. That's the way that I've seen it and experienced it. And I'm completely open to that not being the case, because I'm not really like, again, I'm not set on like my personality anymore. I really, it's so freeing when you let go of who you think you should be, or who you think you ought to be, or who you think you are, to become that which you really are, which is to being capable of truly loving everyone while being able to speak the truth and live the truth. I mean, that's like, who you're going to be when all of this is said and done. It's just a matter of, doing what needs to be done and saying what needs to be said, I suppose. But again, I'm not, like, this is something else I realized recently was, as a man with a full sack, I'm enough. And even when I didn't have a full sack, I'm still enough. And I'm enough in a different kind of way. Like, there's a helicopter, like, literally flying right over. So it's basically like this. When you can truly accept that you might not be fully self-realized in this life, like you might not ever be truly enlightened, I think that that's when you get like truly enlightened. And I don't say like, oh, I think that the case, meaning like, oh, I'm thinking about it. No, it's just that's the way that I'm perceiving it. And that I suppose I could say the way that I perceive it is that, rather than I think about this, because the semantics are very important. And I've been under the impression, and it's been my experience recently, that every single word that I speak turns out to curate my reality. And so one thing I've been doing very different with a few of the Godlike Mastery offers and initiates that I have with my offer that I am doing is I'm giving them certain types of mantras to do in certain modes of being and for certain durations. Not necessarily because it's this magical thing, but it's to prime their subconscious into seeing themselves and seeing reality a different way. And there's something really grounding about just letting go of letting go. When you realize there's really nowhere to be, it's almost like that's when you become the epitome of who you're supposed to be. And that doesn't really make sense because it's paradoxical, but that's the thing. Because if you become, here's something I've learned recently. When I say ignore reality and have fun, I don't mean ignore the suffering of other people. I don't mean ignore people necessarily. I say, or beings like the ladybug. I don't mean that at all. What I mean to say is that if you persist in the quote unquote negative energy that other people are propagating into being, instead of ignoring it and just focusing on being who you want to be and loving everybody and living in the truth and being a signal of sovereignty in sovereign timelines and timelessness, well, then you're not really who you say you are. If you're claiming to be awakened, right? Because really, at the end of the day, it comes down to this. And this is something I told somebody in the Regal Academy recently. You can do one of two things. You can see every experience as a vehicle or a vessel for your process of awakening, or you can see it as a vessel for going to sleep. It's really up to you. Whew-wee. Well, I said everything that I wanted to say, and it is, at least in this video, and it is warm. It is warm out here. It's going to be, I think, the warmest day that we've had all year, so whew. I love the sun though. I love the sun. I feel so free out and about, even with the noise campaigns going on. I feel so free. I feel like I'm on psychedelics, even though I'm not on psychedelics, and I haven't taken psychedelics for years. But nonetheless, if this is resonating with you as me being a signal for godlike mastery and sovereign timelines, then apply to the godlike mastery offer or join the Regal Academy. Be blessed, and peace be with you.